Part 1. I tossed my satchel onto the upholstered bench by the door and stepped into the kitchen. The golden light of late afternoon streamed through the farmhouse window, illuminating the tiled floor in a warm glow. A faint scent of rosemary and garlic lingered in the air, mixed with the comforting aroma of roast chicken cooling on the counter. Beside the bird, perfectly browned and resting on a wooden cutting board, lay a single sheet of glossy, laminated paper. The plastic coating felt cool and smooth beneath my fingertips as I reached for it and held it up to the light. At the top of the page, in thick, uncompromising type, were the words, 20 New Marriage Guidelines. Below that, a subheading read, Rules for Clarity, Harmony, and Mutual Respect. My pulse quickened as I scanned the first 3 bullet points. Rule 1. Share your location in real time via the tracking app. Rule 4. No purchases over €60 without mutual consent. Rule 12. Send hourly status updates when socializing outside the home. The list continued, each rule more invasive than the last, demanding transparency bordering on surveillance. I turned slowly toward the refrigerator, where Jenna stood with her arms crossed and her phone glowing with notifications in her other hand. The warm glow from the window haloed her silhouette, lending a surreal air to the moment. Her lips were pressed together, and her eyes were so calm they sent a chill through me. The woman who had once made me laugh with a glance was now a composed authority figure, her expression unreadable. "What's this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. I raised the sheet slightly, the plastic rustling as I moved. "Are we starting some kind of new program?" She took a deliberate step forward, placing her phone face down on the marble countertop. "I've been reflecting on our communication," she said, voice quiet but firm. "I want us to be fully transparent. These guidelines will prevent misunderstandings and help us connect more deeply." I set the sheet on the counter and placed my hands flat against the cool marble. "Transparency is essential," I agreed softly. "But this feels like oversight, not guidance." Her phone buzzed. She brushed it aside without a glance and met my gaze. "My cousin's husband follows a similar system," she explained. "They say it's improved their marriage dramatically." I felt a knot in my stomach. "It sounds more like a show for others," I said, allowing the words to surface. "A performance to prove loyalty." She shook her head, lips curling down. "It's about trust, about knowing exactly where we stand." I picked up the laminated page again, fingertips tracing the corners where the plastic slightly lifted. "These rules read more like a contract of control," I said. Each clause felt like chains instead of comfort. My heart ached with the memory of when our marriage had felt spontaneous, alive, and free of rigid demands. Jenna bit her lower lip, and the tension in her shoulders flickered for a moment. I realized then that this wasn't just about boundaries. It was a performance for an audience I wasn't meant to see, her circle of friends, the country club wives who reveled in tit-for-tat competitions. I remembered how her laughter used to ring through this very room, genuine and unguarded. I swallowed and sat at the kitchen table, folding my hands in front of me. Jenna perched on the edge of the counter, as though waiting for me to request permission to speak. "I need time," I said quietly. 20 rules aren't something I can agree to on the spot." She nodded once, curtly. "Fine. But these take effect tomorrow." Alone after she left, I studied the list under the yellow glow of the pendant lamp above the table. Rule 6. Surrender all digital passwords. Rule 9. No social plans without prior authorization. Rule 15. Photographic proof required for any deviation from agreed schedules. Rule 17. Gym visits capped at exactly 55 minutes, to be scheduled when verification is possible. Each rule read like paragraphs from a jail sentence rather than proposals for a loving partnership. Morning came and Jenna slipped out for her weekly brunch with those same country club friends. I watched her apply makeup in the hallway mirror, the routine precise and deliberate. Her phone buzzed constantly with chat notifications. I reached for it, handing it back with a smile. "Your friends are excited," I said softly. She paused, catching my drift. "You see this as a competition?" I shrugged, tightening the laces on my running shoes by the doorway. "Maybe it is, but I'm not a prize to be displayed." She frowned. "Where are you off to?" I stepped outside, taking a deep breath of cool morning air. "Out for a run," I said, voice calm. "Somewhere without guidelines." I jogged down the street, plotting my own singular rule. What applies to one must apply to both. I trusted that simple boundary to reclaim our relationship from the contrivances of control and performance. In that thought, I found hope that our marriage could survive this turn and emerge stronger. Part 2. I tossed my bag onto the entryway bench and stepped into the kitchen, the familiar hum of the refrigerator greeting me. On the counter, Next to the single roast chicken I'd prepared earlier lay a glossy, laminated sheet. The header was stamped in thick black letters, 20 new marriage guidelines. My heart skipped a beat. I glanced at the chicken. I left it to rest and cool, then at the paper, thinking it was some light-hearted prank from Jenna. She stood by the fridge, arms folded, heels clicking softly on the tile floor. The late afternoon sunlight angled through the window, catching the edge of that laminated sheet, turning it into a beacon of impending disaster. "What's this?" I asked, lifting the paper and feeling its slick surface beneath my fingertips. Jenna's lips pressed together, corners pinching down. "I've been thinking," she said, voice steady. "We need clearer boundaries. These guidelines will help us avoid misunderstandings." A false calm washed over me. Boundaries. My voice sounded tighter than I intended. I leaned in, scanning the items beneath the header. Rule 1. Share your real-time location. Rule 4. No spending over €60 without approval. Rule 12. Hourly check-ins when you're out with friends. My jaw clenched. This was beyond odd. Jenna took a step closer, phone pressed to her ear like a shield. "My friend's husband follows similar rules," she said quietly. "Their marriage has never been happier." The room felt suddenly smaller. I pressed my palm against the cold countertop, steeling myself. Jenna, the woman whose laughter had once filled this very space, now demanded constant surveillance, receipts for my coffee orders, photo proof of my lateness. It felt like I was reading an absurd legal contract rather than a love letter. "I need time to process this," I managed, voice as calm as I could muster. She clicked her tongue and crossed one leg over the other, phone still glued to her ear. "Not necessary," she replied, flipping the phone shut. "These start tomorrow. No discussion." Something in her posture snapped into focus. I watched the way she bit her lip as if biting back excitement. My gaze drifted to her phone lying face up on the island, the group chat visible. Can't wait to see his face. He'll crumble, trust me. That's when the truth hit me. This wasn't about strengthening our bond, but feeding her social cachet, a circus act to show off the perfect, obedient spouse. The clock's ticking grew deafening between us. I sat at the kitchen table and lifted a fork. The chicken tasted like ashes in my mouth. Jenna perched on a stool, eyes trained on me, waiting for indignation, tears, an epic showdown. Instead, I focused on my meal, plotting my response. Dinner ended with plates scraped clean. I rose and offered her a quiet, assured smile. She blinked, uncertain. I didn't intend to match rule with rule. I had only one reply in mind. Morning light filtered through the blinds as I studied the list again, spotting additional demands. Rule 6. Surrender all digital passwords. Rule 9. Clearance required for any social outing. Rule 15. Attach photographic evidence of tardiness. Rule 17. Limit gym sessions to exactly 55 minutes, scheduled around her availability. My chest tightened. This was a takeover, not guidance. Later, Jenna applied mascara at the hallway mirror, preparing for her brunch with the hillside set. The phone on the vanity buzzed relentlessly. I picked it up casually, handing it back after a glance. Group chat's buzzing. I feigned concern, but my mind was racing. The chat read, "She's so excited. He doesn't know what's coming." My stomach roiled. I wasn't a prize to be flaunted. I was a partner being leveled to a trophy. I left the apartment, lacing my running shoes outside the door. Jenna called from behind. "Where are you going?" Her voice carried a note of authority that I'd never encountered before. I turned slowly, breath steady. "Out for a run, in a place without marriage mandates." She frowned, but I clipped the leash to my wrist and jogged down the block, each step freeing me from her confining script. As the city passed by, I planned the next move, not to negotiate 20 absurd rules, but to reclaim our marriage on my own terms, or to walk away entirely, penning the final guideline myself. Part 3. Jenna's breath hitched, and her eyes darted between me and the phone I held out to her. "If you won't abide by your own guidelines, then the whole system collapses," I said, voice steady, watching the flicker of panic in her expression. Her perfect control blueprint, the 20 rules she'd crafted to tame me, was about to boomerang back on her. She leaned forward, shoulders tense. "This is absurd," she muttered. "The whole point was to bring structure, right?" I shook my head, sliding the phone screen toward her. "No, Jenna. The objective was control, pure and simple. And I refused to be controlled." I tapped the location-sharing icon, the app Jenna had insisted I install shining bright. "Let's enact Rule 1, shall we?" I said quietly. "I've enabled my permanent location feed." I pushed the phone across the darkwood table. The gleaming display stared back at her like an ultimatum. Her fingers hovered, trembling. I need time to think, she stammered. I mirrored her earlier words. There's nothing to deliberate. These rules start now. My tone was an echo of hers from the week before. The silence pulsed. Jenna's nervous drumming on the table broke the stillness. She'd reached the crucible, obey her own restrictions, confess they were unreasonable, or abandon the guys altogether. What if I refuse? She ventured, searching for a loophole. I raised an eyebrow. Then we have a deeper conversation about why you believe you can dictate terms without living by them yourself. Her chest rose and fell. What happens if I don't agree to your addition? She pressed, voice wavering. I shrugged, leaning back into my chair. Then we strip away the illusion of partnership you've tried to stage. The weight of my words hung between us. Her gaze dropped to the grain of the table. After a long moment, she reached for her phone and, hands visibly shaking, activated her location sharing. The app's icon glowed green. Good. Now, I said, Rule 2. Phone access codes. I need yours, just as you demanded mine. She swallowed, handing me the device with a defeated tilt of her head. I entered her passcode, her privacy guidelines now hers to follow. Watching her face register the reversal, I felt a quiet triumph. This wasn't a contest of domination, it was realigning the scales she'd unbalanced. When dawn broke, I anticipated the fallout. Jenna would have had a night to call in reinforcements, to rehearse her retort. I brewed coffee in the kitchen, heart pounding with anticipation. She approached with measured steps. I shadowed. We need to discuss these rules, she began, crossing her arms. I poured 2 cups. Sure. Which one is troubling you the most? I asked, handing her the mug. Her gaze flicked to the steaming liquid, then back to me. The hourly check-ins, she said finally, voice tight. The spending cap, the social approvals. This isn't what I intended. She exhaled sharply. Are you struggling to remember why you wrote them? I asked, leaning on the counter. They weren't designed to strengthen us. They were meant to showcase your ability to tame me. Her face flushed crimson. That's not true. Her voice cracked, betraying uncertainty. I set my cup down. Then tell me which rules you personally find unreasonable. We'll strike them from the list. Her lips pressed into a thin line. To admit any rule was unreasonable would be to unravel her entire argument. But to enforce them on herself, she clearly hadn't thought this through. This isn't a negotiation, she said, voice trembling yet determined. Actually, I countered softly, it is. Either we both adhere to every rule, or they all dissolve. My boundary was clear. Her phone pinged with a new message. I raised an eyebrow, recalling Rule 16. All messages must be read aloud to your spouse. Who's that from? I asked, gesturing to her phone. Swallowing, she held it out. Her thumb hesitated over the screen. It's the group chat. They want updates. I nodded. What do you tell them about me? She stared, caught between her crafted fantasy and the reality she'd unleashed. The words caught in her throat as the chandelier light glinted off her phone's glossy case. I realized then that the last rule she'd need to confront was her own pride, forcing her to decide if equity in marriage meant anything more than a spectacle for an audience. Part 4. I watched Jenna's eyes flicker between me and her phone screen as she hesitated, the group chat notifications blinking insistently. Do you laugh together about how compliant I am? I asked, voice stealing. Is this a competition to see who has the most obedient husband? She opened her mouth, her protest dying on her lips. It's not like that, she whispered. I held up my hand. Show me the chat. My tone brooked no refusal. For a moment, she seemed paralyzed, as though the phone might burn her fingers. Then, with a reluctant sigh, she passed it over. I scrolled through the banter poised at the top. He's such a good boy. Bet mine is more punctual. 6 of her friends, corporate wives all, were comparing notes on their husband's obedience, sharing tips for tighter control. I handed back her phone with a polite nod. Congratulations, I said quietly. You're winning the contest for most controlled husband. But I'm withdrawing from the game. Her lips trembled. What does that mean? She asked, voice shrinking. It means, I explained, I refuse to be the subject of your social experiment or the punchline in your group chat. I married a partner, not a pet. I walked over to the fridge and peeled the laminated sheet of rules from its magnet. The paper's corners curled slightly. Here's how this ends, I said, standing in the gentle hum of the kitchen. Either we both follow every rule, starting with you sharing those chat messages in real time, or we tear up this entire system and actually talk about our marriage. Jenna's gaze tracked the rule sheet in my hands as if searching for a hidden escape hatch. You wouldn't understand, she murmured, recalling the other wives she'd aligned with. I set the paper on the counter between us. I don't care about them. I care about us, and right now there isn't in US. There's just you issuing orders and a husband you've tried to control. Over the next few days, Jenna's strategy morphed through every manipulation in her repertoire. First, anger. She accused me of being unreasonable, distrustful, and immature. I stood firm, replying that respect can't be coerced. When rage failed, she switched to tears, sobbing that she only wanted to feel secure. I offered a tissue but held my ground. Security doesn't come from rules. It comes from equality, I told her gently as she dabbed her eyes. Her next move was to recruit sidekicks. Her mother called, worried about marital strife. A friend sent a sympathetic text. Maybe he's just tired. To each interloper, I said the same thing. This is between my wife and me. But tell me, did she mention the 20 rules she crafted? Or just my one? My calm question left callers at a loss for reply. By day 5, selective compliance emerged. Jenna insisted she didn't need spending limits. She was better with money than I was. I had the bank statements at hand, but I offered her the rational remedy. If a rule feels unfair, we eliminate it entirely for both of us. That, too, she couldn't accept, because each rule chipped away at her illusion of power. The breaking point arrived on day 7. Jenna returned from a shopping trip with the Rule Makers Club, arms heavy with bags. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I opened it to tally her violations. No GPS check-ins, no hourly texts, no spending approvals, no social verification. She dropped the bags at the door and met my gaze. I was busy, she snapped. I nodded, scrolling through the infractions. 7 rule violations in one afternoon. You do know who you were with, right? Her protest faltered. I thought you knew. Doesn't matter, I said softly. Under your system, excuses don't erase infractions. Her shoulders slumped. What do you want? I folded the phone and looked her in the eye. I want you to acknowledge this isn't working. Not for marriage, but for your image in that group chat. Her voice wavered. That's not fair. Let's be honest, I pressed. Would you have written these rules if you weren't trying to outdo your friends? If you weren't showing off how well you can control your spouse? Silence was her answer. She looked away, gaze fixed on the living room wall, as if she'd just realized that the rules she designed weren't about love or structure. They were about a prize in a contest she never intended to win. Part 5. A gentle breeze drifted through the open kitchen window as I looked Jenna in the eyes across the counter. You know what bothers me most? I asked, voice low but unwavering. It's not that you tried to control me, it's that you believed I wouldn't notice. That you assumed I'd quietly become a pet project, something to boast about to your friends. Her shoulders slumped, and she slid onto a stool, her composed facade finally cracking. They make it sound so easy, she murmured, eyes fixed on her hands. I softened my tone. They talk about husbands who just comply, or wives who sugarcoat how things really work. I paused, letting the silence settle. But neither scenario is what I want. For the first time since the rules appeared, I caught a glimpse of pure vulnerability in her gaze. No calculated tears, just genuine regret. She lifted her eyes to mine. What happens now? She whispered. I pulled out a chair and sat opposite her, leaning forward. Now, I began. We decide what kind of marriage we really want. One built on mutual respect, or one waged as a battle for control. Her lips trembled. I don't want to fight anymore. Me neither, I agreed gently, reaching out to still her hand. But I won't be controlled by you or anyone. Jenna nodded slowly, as if a fundamental shift had just taken place. The power play was dissolving, not because I'd beaten her, but because I refused to play. She glanced at the laminated rule sheet. What about these? She asked, voice shaky. I stood and plucked it from the fridge. The rules fluttered in my hand like autumn leaves. I think we both know what needs to happen, I said. That night, we sat up talking until the stars faded. No scripts, no hidden motives, just 2 people sharing their truths. Jenna confessed how seductive her friend's competition had been, how powerful she'd felt orchestrating every move in our marriage. But it didn't feel right. It never had. I shared how betrayed I felt, how I'd missed the equal partnership we once had. Together, we envisioned a new dynamic. Decisions made jointly, boundaries set collaboratively, trust rebuilt through actions instead of mandates. 2 days later, Jenna quietly left her group chat. 3 days after that, she declined the usual Sunday brunch invitation. Her message to her friends was clear. Our marriage wasn't a competition, and I wasn't a project. It wasn't a perfect transition. Old patterns tried to resurface. She slipped once, reminding me of purchase approvals. With calm consistency, I reminded her of our shared vision without anger. Gradually, the power dynamic rebalanced. True, the rules had only taken hold because I'd allowed them. The moment I enforced that single boundary, what applied to one must apply to both, her entire contrivance unraveled. Now, when decisions arise, we decide them together. When boundaries are needed, they apply equally. We check in not because of a rule, but because we choose to. Last week, Jenna received a message from one of her old friends. He finally rebelled and walked out. The voice on the other end sought tactics to bring him back in line. Jenna's reply was simple: I don't have that answer anymore. What worked for us was equality. Later, we sat on our porch watching the sun dip below the horizon. She turned to me, genuine curiosity in her eyes. How did that one rule change everything? I smiled. Control only works when it's one-sided. The moment it had to be reciprocal, its true nature was exposed. She nodded thoughtfully. You could have walked away. Walking away was never the goal, I said, squeezing her hand. Restoring balance was. I didn't need 20 rules, threats, or ultimatums. I just needed one principle. What's good for one must be good for both. In the end, that simple boundary did more than any argument ever could. It transformed our marriage from a power struggle back into a true partnership, built not on domination, but on choice. That's the real power in a relationship. The end.